Hi guys, good afternoon. My name is Rafael Trinhago. I am the team leader for customer success here at GLS. And today we'll be looking at ways to stress less in a fast-paced legal landscape, as well as looking at, I guess, different ways that you can kind of address stress, breaking down some of what those stresses are, so you can sort of better manage them. And yeah, just really looking at some of the solutions that exist, as well as how things are progressing within the industry, and hopefully towards a sort of more beneficial outcome. So if I share my screen with you, just bear with. Right, so this. Fantastic. So how to stress less in a fast-paced legal landscape. And of course, it's important to consider, for example, the lawyer lifestyle, right? So what things happen throughout a lawyer's day-to-day that can sort of lead to these outcomes. So for example, it's an unfortunate but well-known fact that lawyers do lead a stressful life. In fact, looking at some studies in the UK, they top the list when it comes to the most stressed professionals. And according to Lawyer Monthly, for example, highly stressed workers are almost twice as likely to make unhealthy lifestyle choices. And when you're sort of making these unhealthy lifestyle choices, the issue can sort of compound and just become a lot worse. So for example, the Global Benefits Attitude Survey from Willis Towers Watson, which surveyed 2,800 UK employees at medium and large private sector companies, found that roughly 61% of employees with high levels of stress are more likely to eat badly, they're more likely to smoke, they're more likely to have drinking problems, and also suffer from a lack of sleep. And this compares with just 34% of those with low-level stress. And then, of course, a topic that's received quite a lot of attention over recent years, but we would potentially argue that maybe not enough attention, is the mental health issues that arise from, certain lifestyles. So, for example, studies also report that in the last 5 years, more than 3,500 out of every 100,000 legal professionals suffered from anxiety, stress, and in some cases, even depression. And that obviously needs to be something that needs to be addressed in general, but also within law, of course. Now, other outcomes that you get from sort of following an unhealthy lifestyle, they're sort of things that you might have heard before. So things like physical burnout, you get mental burnout as well. But one very important topic that also is getting quite a lot of attention, but we would argue needs more, is the issue of addiction. And it's quite daunting to see what the sort of research is saying about this. So for example, a UK government statistics report says that the rates of addiction are up to 3 times higher amongst lawyers compared to the national average. And also interesting to note that, for example, where they're seeing, I guess, the biggest risk of people becoming problem drinkers are actually amongst junior lawyers, which is relatively worrying. So, of course, now we sort of understand the lifestyle and what can sort of lead, what it can sort of lead to. It's important to understand what are the components that sort of affecting individuals to find themselves in these kind of scenarios. So we'll look at the leading stresses behind this. But for example, what did the stats say? So a UK survey of 300 legal professionals who actually come from the top 50 to 100 law firms identified a few reasons that we'll look at. But just before breaking those down, I think it's important to focus on the main reasons. So out of the 300, 219 said they're struggling to cope with long hours and overworking. 122 actually cited pay as a key issue and a contributor to their stress. And 113 felt that the billing targets were a major factor in adding to their stress. But if you want to kind of sort of break this down, what we sort of identified and what we found is you have 2 sort of avenues for this. You have your personal stresses and your workplace stresses as well. And it's important to kind of stay on top of both because they do affect each other. So personal stresses, what sort of things come up for lawyers? You have financial issues. Even if you consider, for example, the financial burden of law school, which I guess relative to other careers and other areas of study is a lot higher, that can just sort of add to the stress of individuals. And then there's another interesting issue as well, and something that I think needs to have a lot of discussion around it, but it's the struggle to get help. And it's important to note the reason why individuals find that they're struggling to get help for their issues. So for example, people feel that there's still going to be quite a lot of backlash if they, I guess, discuss their mental health issues and addiction problems. And especially for lawyers, they feel that if they bring those issues to certain people, that their careers may suffer in the long term because of it. So what you end up in is sort of a vicious cycle where you're not actually addressing the issue, but just sort of carrying on. And then, of course, you just have general personal problems. These are going to look different based on the individual, of course. But, they are very personal, but also universal as well. Everybody has something they're dealing with and something that can sort of bleed into other areas of their life. But now, focusing on the workplace stresses, a lot of these will be quite typical to you guys. But yeah, it's important to know they sort of come up quite often in quite a few studies, but you have things like heavy workload. You have client expectations, which is a major one. So, the constant pressure and the need to sort of be available and responsive at literally all times can sort of add a lot of stress to people. You have things like billing targets, which may sort of be increasing. A lot of individuals don't feel like they're getting the right support from their firm to be able to meet those targets. And then you have also the issue of external competition as well. You're competing internally, you're competing externally against different firms, which can sort of just add to those issues. And of course, something which is always very difficult to kind of completely eliminate is internal politics and issues, which always exist in one shape or another. And then you have the concern around sort of meeting regulation and meeting sort of regulatory requirements, which is obviously a major factor in the field of law. Other sort of stresses, constant tight deadlines. If you complete a case today, it doesn't mean that the journey is essentially over. You might pick up a new case, which means that you'll have new deadlines to look at. And obviously this kind of cycle can just start adding on to stress for individuals. And then there's things like time wasted on menial, non-billable tasks, very repetitive tasks over time can sort of just lend to burnout. You also have high stakes cases as well. So for a lot of lawyers, for example, they might be dealing with a case that, if they don't get the favorable outcome, then their client might be losing their home. They could lose their livelihood, and in some cases, even their freedom. And obviously, if you're in any way, shape, or form emotionally invested in what you do, then yeah, this can have sort of a negative outcome and impact on you as well. And of course, you're going to have things like colleague and management scrutiny. And one that we find very interesting here at GLS is the lack of software training. There's a lot of people that understand that there are solutions out there. They know that tech, for example, is something that can sort of address a lot of these issues, but they don't necessarily have the capacity and capability to learn these and use these systems. Especially whilst trying to lead a busy lifestyle, which is fair enough. On the flip side, and something that's quite interesting as well, is you have people that are quite proficient with technology, but they're finding that there's too many systems in their firm. So they're constantly having to sort of juggle between, an application that does this and another one that does something else. And that having to kind of jump and learn different systems sort of adds to stress as opposed to alleviate it. Which is why, for example, we think it's quite important to have at least a lot of your functions consolidated in one place to sort of save you from having to constantly jump around. But we'll focus on that more in a second. Of course, we're here to sort of provide you guys with solutions, not just focus on the issues. So let's, for example, look at the personal stresses and some solutions that we'd like to recommend here at GLS. So some ways to cope with these type of stresses. You have things like mindfulness. This can be quite difficult, but a lot of research basically says if you can take the time to take just a step back to kind of look at your situation in its entirety, and really just kind of plan better, and just break things down into smaller chunks, for example, it can make everything a little bit more manageable. And it's something that I've sort of read a lot myself, sort of researching in the past, just try to schedule some time for mindfulness, to really look at how you can sort of improve your current situation if you're feeling quite stressed and things like that. Another side of it, of course, is physical activity. I'm personally a strong believer of healthy body, healthy mind. And of course, if you are doing the right things in your life and you're following the right sort of habits, then it will only have a beneficial impact on things like your mental health. And another one, which may be a little bit controversial, is of course getting enough sleep. Everybody seems to recommend the 8-hour sleep. Everybody knows the benefit of getting the 8-hour sleep as well, but that can be quite difficult to do when you're leading a very busy lifestyle. If you're unable to do this, my strong recommendation, just try to improve the quality of sleep that you're getting. And this is helped by sort of other things, like, for example, if you exercise enough, you're going to sleep better. Avoiding alcohol late at night especially is something that will sort of help you get much better sleep, as well as caffeine. And some actual tech tools that can help you with this. Some mental health apps that we're sort of comfortable recommending is Sanvelo. Sanvelo was actually nominated by Very Well Mind as the best app of 2021 for reducing stress. You have MoodFit, and you also have your meditation apps as well. So things like Calm, Headspace, and Balance. Meditation is something that a lot of people swear by and live by. Yes, this may be something that could be quite good for you as well. And then, of course, you have just things that can help you with your day-to-day. For example, scheduling apps like TickTick, and then saving apps like Money Dashboard and Yolt as well, if those are things that you find yourself struggling with, for example. So focusing now on the workplace stressor solutions. First and foremost, you want to alleviate heavy workloads and really just kind of remove obstacles, clarify your priorities, remove those low-impact tasks. And I think it's important to set yourself as a good example by not overworking yourself as well. Because also, for example, if you're not overworked, then you can actually take the time to also step back, have a look at everything happening in the team, and just be more aware of what's happening as well, which is very important. You want to get ahead of any conflicts and any issues that sort of start to stew and grow. Take action to improve your employees' happiness. This is absolutely crucial. Take their feedback, make sure that you show that you're listening to their feedback, and just address any issues that they bring up. Definitely try to improve team relationships. Don't let things bubble under the surface between, two people or other members of the team. If they're having to come into an office, or if they're having to collaborate with people that they really don't like being around for 8, 10, or even 12 hours or more a day, they're going to feel unhappy quite quickly as well. And again, just going back to the other point, so definitely provide that outlet to give and receive feedback. When you're giving your feedback, you want to make sure that the person is able to take the criticism on board in a not a nice way, but in a beneficial way. So instead of just being very critical, maybe just focus on how you can help them improve in areas that they can be improving on. And at the same time, you should be open-minded to receiving feedback from your team as well. So you could learn about different ways that you could better manage that specific person, because ultimately people are different. They are individuals as well. So just something to consider. Oh, and also act on feedback. Being listened to, of course, people like that. Your team will be happy if they feel that they are being listened to, but also if nothing changes over the long term, that can have sort of a negative outcome. So of course, improving relationships, your own personal relationships with your employees is always good to do. And I think it's just important to create a very candid culture and a very transparent culture, which approaches conflict head on. Again, doesn't let things sort of stew and bubble under the surface. And you need to be able to have, that level of transparency where people can feel that they come to you with an issue. Regardless of what that issue might be, you may not necessarily want to lose a member of your team who's actually having a hard time, but may not feel that they can communicate that with you. That's probably not an ideal situation for anybody involved. So just something important to consider. So we at GLS, one major thing that we're big on, of course, and it's only naturally, but we believe that tech is one of the biggest sort of fixes when it comes to workplace stresses. So what should tech do for you? Automate your tasks. This is absolutely key, especially if your team is spending a lot of time dealing with those very repetitive, administrative tasks, for example. Automate them and really help alleviate a lawyer's workload. Give them more time to work on other important tasks so that they can leave the office at a more sociable hour as well. We just really focus and zone in on those important sort of things that they're focusing on. Definitely facilitate teamwork. This is absolutely crucial. So for example, you want a cloud-based system that your team can sort of collaborate on, a secure system ideally, and something that's quite seamless when it comes to collaboration. This was obviously, emphasized a lot more during the unfortunate COVID-19 pandemic, where a lot of people were sort of forced to work away from the office, and it's kind of expedited this adoption of technology across the industry in any case. The ability to sort of work as a team, a cloud-based solution, everybody can access pretty much from their own devices. And within that solution, you want to be able to have features that allows them to collaborate. So for example, at GLS, we have implemented an internal chat hub where your team can sort of speak to each other. But also, for example, from a manager's point of view, we have things like a smart calendar, which allows you to stay on top of events that are happening and also set and schedule events for your team, as well as just other ways to sort of collaborate on tasks between team members. Naturally, you do want to kind of remove that admin burden, which we sort of covered before in terms of automating the task, but just to kind of emphasize this point a little bit more because it really is key and the technology is out there that really sort of helps you do this. But for example, you shouldn't be, inputting clients' names into things like standard letters and templates or emails. Systems do that. The right tags, will let you draw any data that you need to be added to the template. And also, apart from just saving time, you get the added benefit of sort of standardizing your communication, which makes everybody in the team more efficient overall. Of course, you want to sort of free up billable time. So you want to reduce that administrative burden once again. And effectively, you don't want to constantly be having to jump between applications as well. Everything should be accessible from the cloud so it can be retrieved at any time and at any place as well. And just all this stuff will sort of really help you free up time so you can focus on more profitable sort of endeavors. And of course, technology has to absolutely help you adhere to regulations. When it comes to law and when it comes to the field, a big part of it is sort of following regulatory requirements and things like that. So the tech should be able to help you do that. And when it comes down to it, essentially, how easy is it for you to access and retrieve information at a moment's notice should you be requested from regulators, for example. And the system should be able to give you the power to do that. And then you also have things like email filtration, which we think is absolutely crucial as well. GLS, for example, allows you to send and receive emails directly within the system. Just having that sort of communication in one place, just consolidating everything once again is absolutely crucial. And also in GLS, what you'll sort of find is that emails themselves, they'll log to the individual matters page. So instead of you constantly having to kind of go through inboxes to find emails that you receive from clients or documents or anything like that, it's a lot easier to find these things within the right system. A system should, of course, help you with better time management. For example, things like a smart calendar. And, for example, I'd imagine that most lawyers, of course, they do have things in place to be able to manage their schedule naturally, but it should just make things a lot more efficient. So if you, for example, have a smart calendar, that also allows for integration with, apps like Zoom or Teams, just even that can sort of speed things up a little bit more and just help you make sure, for example, that you've set the meeting and communicated that meeting with the client without having to say go back to something because something else came up and distracted you, for example. Of course, something that we touched on before is the collaboration enablement. This is absolutely crucial. And also, if you have the right system, you can end up inevitably creating a workflow that lets you assign tasks and monitor those tasks from a manager's point of view, for example, without ever having to actually speak to your team. And at the same time, if I'm, for example, a caseworker, paralegal, whatever that might be, trainee solicitor, by having that sort of, ability to communicate internally within the system, I can get clarification or decisions or anything else that I need sooner rather than later, which is absolutely crucial as well. And one thing that we're absolutely major on our side. So a system, it should be easy to use and it should be simple. This is absolutely crucial. Looking at studies as well, it's something that a lot of lawyers, for example, are requesting. Because I think at this point, a lot of people have had experience with some quite complex systems, and traditionally, of course, things are going to be quite complex, and inevitably they sort of go towards becoming a lot more simpler. But the reasons for this, right? So, as a busy lawyer, you don't want to spend so much time getting to grips with the system or having to learn a system before you can start being sort of productive with that system, because inevitably, essentially, that's the point of legal tech. And at the same time, for example, if you're in a growing firm and you're planning to hire, for example, you don't want to constantly be training those new hires when they come on board. So the system, it should be easy to use, it should be intuitive, and it should be simple. There's always going to be teething issues. Naturally, this is the case with any system. But ideally, those teething issues should be relatively easy to get past. And once you're past those issues as well, it should be relatively easy to carry on and sort of run on your own, whilst also receiving the level of support that you need. Because obviously people are different in terms of their capacity with technology and that sort of thing. And of course, the system, it should be affordable. It should sort of match your budget naturally. You don't want to necessarily be making massive investments into tech and then having to sort of work more to be able to sort of make the payments, for example. But yeah, and one thing that we're going to look at as well. So we'll look at changes that are happening in the legal world today. With a lot of these changes hopefully coming into effect in the near future. And a lot of them, I believe, are sort of happening today. So for example, you have things like a hybrid and flexible working model. You'll see a lot of firms sort of transitioning. In fact, a lot of companies across all industries transitioning to having this hybrid working model. And once again, with the right system in place, you know, it allows for that. Again, you're working through the right system. It doesn't matter where somebody is. You're still collaborating. You're still working together, and you're still producing. Growing legal technology budgets, again, something that is or has been emphasized by the COVID-19 pandemic. There's a lot more appetite for bringing in the right technology. So with budgets growing, of course, you'll be seeing a lot more tech being used across firms. But at the same time, with the budgets for tech growing, what you also see is increased development in this area. So the technology itself will only improve over time. There is an increase in non-lawyer staff being hired, sort of administrative staff that can sort of come in and help with other tasks. And we believe also, for example, a system should allow for admins as well as fee earners, because naturally a law firm isn't just made up of fee earners, is it? It's made up of different people doing different things, sort of contributing to the overall outcome. We're seeing a greater focus on mental health and well-being. You know, the stigmas are sort of dropping more and more each year. And I think inevitably we'll get to a point where people are more comfortable sort of discussing this sort of thing, and companies are a lot more aware of this and addressing them head on, as opposed to just kind of sweeping it under the rug. Again, with the improvement in technology, there'll be increase in automation, which will be absolutely fantastic. And we're obviously very eager to see how that sort of plays out. And there's also things like client-led change, which is very, very interesting. Of course, you know, clients are expecting services to be a lot faster, to be a lot more affordable nowadays. And that's also one thing which is sort of driving the growth and adoption of legal technology. But yeah, so sort of that sort of expectation from clients is really changing the field as a whole. So yeah, we hope you found this useful. Definitely connect with us and connect with myself on LinkedIn. And yeah, so essentially, look, just to kind of round this off, looking after yourself and your mental health is absolutely important and essential. It's something that has to be met head on. Again, not something you should sort of just sweep under the rug and just forget about. Because obviously, if you do address these issues, you know, you'll find yourself being more productive. You'll find yourself just essentially living a better life and just being a lot happier. So it's definitely something that you should focus on. And I hope we were able to help you find a few ways to stress less. And yeah, definitely connect with us if you want to have a look at the technology and how we can potentially help you in your firm. Bye now.